Righty, so in week 5 for attendance, we're going to get you started on your decision making app. Now, this will be also the next item that you'll have to do, and I'll have a video for that. But in this week, what we're going to do is set up the HTML and the CSS by taking the 4.2 output and using that and then customizing it for your specific decision making app. So here's what this looks like, and this is the point at which you'll start, I mentioned it last week, but start thinking about a decision that you make quite often. As a matter of fact, the decision I ended up coding was actually about my workouts because it's a decision I make a lot. And what I did for this round is I came up with, and this is what you're going to end up doing as we work through this, and you can see it looks like the carbon footprint, but it's customized with my content, it's customized with my input. So what you have to do here is think about what are the things that you take into consideration that therefore become form inputs for your decision app. Now for this one, for this step in attendance, we're going to be having you update the inputs, okay, changing the colors, and then on the next one we'll actually start coding. Okay, so you won't take all of that 4.2. As a matter of fact, it'll only be the HTML and the CSS, but the rest of it we will build as we go. So I just want you to think about this, right? So now what you're about to do here, right? Could it change? Sure. But I would say the longer we go into this, I wouldn't want it to change. But the more thought you've given it today, the more likely, I would hang with that. The other thing I suggest is don't overthink this one, because sometimes I've found students will actually want to create a fairly elaborate decision making process. So, and again, when we get to the first item, which is the next thing you'll do, you'll see where I will give you guidance, because the one big difference between the carbon footprint and what you're about to at least start on is you're going to actually have to write some decision code versus what we did in the carbon footprint is we had a calculator that just calculated the score. Okay. Now again, that's what's coming, but in this case, this time, you're just going to think about the input. So I used a regular number input. Now I ended up using a drop down. I don't make you, right? You could use the ones that we've already gone through, but using a different input is not a bad thing. And then of course I use radio buttons, which we have used. Okay, so we've used these two. I did something different. For this first round, it's 3 to 4 inputs. I used 3 just to give you that simple view of it. Okay, so I just want to tell you what we're doing before we jump in. Okay, so by the way, this is 20% of your grade as we move through the weeks. Now, this is your attendance score. You get graded for doing this work, but the next item was where we actually jump in and start doing the JavaScript. Okay, so I've given you here a link to the instruction. Okay, and this just breaks down how you get graded, and this breaks down how you share out and in this case it'll be a print screen once you go through this process. Okay, so here on the instruction, right, what you're going to do now, you're going to create a new, in your private repo, right, you're going to create a new folder, and that's going to be called, actually that should be my app. Oh, I'll fix that. As a matter of fact, I'll fix that right now. Okay, so in your private repo, you're going to create a new folder, okay, and it's going to be called my app. Okay, and this should be located at the root of your repo, of your private repo. So when we say root, and I'm just going to come over to mine, here's my private repo. So that's the root of the repo itself. So when you create and you use this icon to create a new folder, now the key is where is your highlighting when you're creating that new folder, right? So in that case, make sure it's in that root, and then you create the my app. Okay, and then inside of there you will create another folder. Okay, so another folder called step 1. Now what we'll do is each time we do a step, you'll create a new one, right? And then all the files that we'll work on will go in here. Now we're not going to copy all of them in, so don't do that. But in this case, you'll then have, and I'll show you how I already have mine. So I have my step 1. Okay, now mine has a little more, so don't worry about that. More than anything, just know the structure. So it's root, my app, okay, which you'll end up having steps over time, but then in there in my app, create another folder called step 1. Okay, Now, in this step one, you're going to create a README file. Okay, and then here's the heading, and these are markdown headings. Okay, so you've been seeing markdown in the instruction, but now you actually get to use it, and I give you actually the syntax to do that. Okay, so create, and this is very specific about the syntax of this name, the inside the step one, the readme.md. Okay, in there. Now, what you're going to include in here is the name of your project. Briefly describe your specific decision. Okay, your app decision is designed to do. What is it designed to do? Again, this will be refined over time, so give it, the more thought you give it now, the better over time it will be, right? Now, this is your description of what it's going to be. So for me, right, my app is going to be, what does my workout look like today? Okay, so determine the type of workout for me based on my energy score, the outside temp, right, and my the day of the week, right? So that's going to be the day of the week. So I have 3 inputs as of this version, okay? So, and now this talks about the version, the inputs, right? So we've used checkboxes, we've used radio buttons, we've used inputs. So, you know, but more than anything, you want to think about what are those inputs that you're going to use. Now, again, this is a planning document, so just think about what you're going to do there, okay? Because draft this, right? Now, I wrote what I do is I draft my concepts, and then I have chat, or actually in my case Gemini, help me clean it up, because and then I want to read through it and make sure it still is giving me, right, a good representation, or the representation of what I want. Now, color palette. So in this case, you're going to choose a color palette, and there's great ways to help you do this. I'm going to open this in a new tab. I'm not necessarily a designer, but what's great here is that they actually do create some, you know, some styles for me, and notice how these colors are actually the kind of letters that represent these. There's different ways to look at colors. We don't talk about it here, but if you're in web development, you definitely would. I'm going to go back just to show you in this case, right? So you can look at 10 million different ones. So you can scroll through and go, oh, you know, I kind of like this one. This one was probably, I think, along the lines of what I looked at. And so what I did here is I just said open, and then I went in and looked at, okay, so you want to choose 3 colors, okay? So at least 3 colors, right? So, and I said hex here, but if you also write your hex code, I'll show you how in DevTools to see this, right? So you can also, so you choose a theme, right? Give it a hex code like this, right? Primary hex codes, and it looks like this, and I showed you in there. Okay, so I've given you 3 other sites to do it. Okay, so first do that. So create your document. Inside your document, you will have the answers to these using, again, and this for each one of these sections, you have an H2, okay, like this, and then you would have project name, description, input, and color. Okay, so now commit that, files and doc started. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to copy the index HTML from the ending code in carbon footprint 4.2, the exercise we did, and paste it into your folder for step 1. Okay, and then all the content specific elements. Now we're going to end up, you know, you're going to end up making your own elements here. You still remember, because we're copying it, the other one exists, so make sure you are not modifying the one over at 4.2, because you want to have that one intact. Okay, so you get to approach this. You don't have to commit to the end, so you kind of get to figure out how you want to approach this. I ended up, because I had given this document this part of the project enough time to understand, oh yeah, here's the inputs I want. Doing this was a bit more just like mechanically getting it done, right? So update the headings, right? So the page headings, the paragraph, and the submit button. So what that looked like for me here, right? So here's my headings, each of them, my inputs, and then my buttons needed to all change. Now this is just, again, this is the HTML, right? In this case, now this is also CSS. We're going to do that in a minute, but I'm just telling you, when you're changing those things. Now, in your HTML, there are also attributes. So what we need to do is also change those things. So where it says ID, right, we're going to change that to be specific to yours. Now, I'll just give you an example of mine so you can see this. If I right-click, hit inspect, go down into my form, I gave it an ID of workout. So I would then go through in all of these things, right? And you don't want to have anything left over from the carbon footprint because these are now specific to your app. Okay, and this is how I will grade this, and you'll need to get this done, just as we move forward as well. Okay, so IDs, names, values, fors, and placeholder text there. Okay, so do that. So you're going to customize, right? So this is the HTML. And so now this is what, and I probably started here, but also here's where, and you can kind of, again, do this in whichever way makes sense. I've given it to you in this order, but you have one commit, so you can kind of figure out how you want to do this. So decision input form. This is what I was talking about before with here's my inputs. You need 3 or 4 of them, right? 3 or 4 distinct inputs. You must show a variety, right? Don't make them all a number, right? So you need a variety of things here. Now we'll end up adding some more later, so just keep that in mind. So text input, checkbox input, radio buttons, right? Number inputs, right? You could also use, if you wanted to, text area or select. So that's what I ended up doing for mine, was I ended up using a select here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get rid of these two, so I just don't have more to look at. So this is what I was talking about too, is rename all your IDs, right, and names, attributes to be specific for your data, right? So if you didn't catch them all, make sure you do end up getting them all for that. Now you're not going to use name here. This is just the example. As well, in your decision section, so where we had the results before, now you're going to have a section that you'll update for your decision display section. Okay, so update that as well. So if you were looking at that, it would be, I'd scroll down. So in here, my section ID, I kept it results container, which was fine. That was actually the class. I'd want to keep that. Okay, and then there is my paragraph and then div breakdown. Now we haven't gone too much here. We've just started to look at this, right? So, but then here's my IDs for these as well. Now we don't actually, right now, I'm not planning us to get all the way here, but we will get there eventually. So the more work you do, and be consistent. That's the key to actually doing this, is actually being consistent. And part of what we're doing is just helping you understand again why things are set up the way they are. Okay, so now HTML updated. Okay, so now once you do that, then copy over your style CSS from the ending code, right, into your step 1. Right, now you have to update. Now, by the way, this actually should be, I just realized looking at this, it actually will already include this as well, so just make sure it's there. Now you're going to apply color strategically. So you set up that color palette, right? And so now you're going to apply some color here, right? This makes it your own. This is a step of doing that, right? So you... you've copied your CSS from the 4.2 as a base, but you must update colors to match your palette, right? So your body, your family, your font, you can change that, your line height, your text, your background color, right? The styles of your elements. So this is all the stuff you do here. Now, this is where DevTools is really, really handy, okay? So as an example, on the background, I could right click, I could hit inspect, I could click on body, and then on my styles, notice that there's a background. So once I look at my palette and I kind of am playing around with it, the nice thing is it's got this nice color feature. So you can actually, kind of see if you wanted a little variation on that. But typically on colors, I kind of like what the palette gives me because it knows more than I do about it. But the nice thing here is you can get it in different formats, but you need it in hex code for that. But you can do the same with, oh, by the way, other thing is you can actually see in the CSS file where this is. So this is when you would go into that line, right, in there, and you would find, this actually shows you here. Now changing it here doesn't change it there. You would go into your VS Code and then change those colors here. And this should be the fun part, okay? This should be the part that actually is kind of fun. fun. Okay, so you do all that and you're like CSS updated. Cool. Okay, so again, we'll refine this, we'll add inputs, we'll have you do some other things later, but that gives you those steps, okay, or that setup. All right, so now I'm going to come back here. I was actually just showing you it was worth 20%. So now you've done this. Here's the way I'm going to grade it. Did you create it the correct file and folder, right? You did the README file contain all the requirements? Did you customize your HTML and CSS? I'll go through and look at those, right? And then did your commit messages align with these things above, right? So that's where these points come from, so 80 points. So then what you're going to do is we're going to share out, right? So you're going to share out a print screen of your design, right? So take a print screen of your design and then rename it, right? Give it, use our naming conventions of lowercase, no space. Now in this case, and this is important, now you're going to create a new folder in your public repo. Now why public? Because public is where we can all see each other's files, not in the private repo, right? If you were to do this in the private repo, what you're about to do wouldn't work. Okay, so in this case, I took my private repo, I created an image, and then I placed that print screen in there. Okay, now my print screen is 8, and now this is where your resolution of your screen makes this thing either really big, depending on what that is. Hopefully you all know how to take print screens, right? For the Mac, it's pretty easy. I get this. There's a clipping tool for Windows. So however you do that, eventually get it into your public repo under that new folder. Okay, now I actually want to show you, because I went ahead and did version control for that. I don't even know if I give you a message that I make you do for that. I don't. So use whatever commit. Oh, I did. Commit message W5PS print screen, right? So place it in there and then do your version control, do your git push so it's out there. And so see mine, if I go into my public and go into my image, I see it. Here it is. Okay. Now I want to show you, now that I have clicked all the way in, how do I then make this show up in Canvas, right, in the discussion? And this is important. Don't attach this. I don't give you points for that, because as people who are working on the web, we need to understand we can use external references. So here's what you do. In this view of it, again, I'm going to go to images. I'm just going to click on it. You might think I'd grab this, but the better way is to right click, open in a new tab. And what that does, it gives me a URL that looks like this, raw get user content. I'm going to copy it, come back to the discussion. Inside of here now, we're going to embed it. Okay, so don't attach it. You don't get points for that, at least for the first part of this. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, actually, if you're taking HTML, you actually know how to do this, but if you don't, which is fine, right, you're going to upload. You might think we're going to upload an image, but we're actually not, because under this upload image, there's a URL. Okay, so if you were to accidentally come in here and drag it in here, you lose points. So in here, we get the URL. We'll paste it, right? Rio's print screen of PS screen of HTML and CSS, whatever. You can give it some more here, but embed the image. Now watch what will happen when I hit submit here, is it actually places that in the discussion. And so in here, if I wanted to write code, and this is how you drop into code, okay, but in that case, if you want to use the what we call the GUI interface, you can do that as well. Okay, so then write a brief description of your app, and then reply to some student, like look at their thing, read their description, make any comments about that, anything you have regarding that. Okay, so you get 20 points for doing your post here, and then 10 points from doing your reply. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this part, and then we'll now talk about the actual coding part of this. All right, talk to you later.